I am very pleased to introduce our speaker this morning, who is Sophia Mohr. She is the first Chief Innovation and Technology Officer for the Central Ohio Transit Authority. Very first. Lots of firsts here. Since joining CODA in September 2019, Sophia has focused on expanding the use of technology to reimagine and advance mobility. She's played a key role in rolling out the first bus on-demand service in North America, which was honored in 2021 by the Intelligent Transportation Society of America with the Best of Mobility On-Demand Award. Sophia is also instrumental in an effort to share artificial intelligence data regarding traffic infrastructure and connected vehicle data across Central Ohio to improve safety. In November 2021, her team launched CODA's digital payment system, which improves equity and access for transit customers. Speaking this morning on the theme, Now, please join me in welcoming Sophia Mohr.
Thank you. All right, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. It's so great to see people in person. And now that I'm up here, I feel like I'm not used to this anymore either. So I'm just excited to have this opportunity with all of you. And today I'm going to talk about opportunities in the past, present, and future. But first, I want to have all of you take a moment and imagine a place as far away from here as you can imagine. This place has 8 of the 10 highest mountains in the world. It's also the birthplace of Buddha. And this place is so special that foreigners aren't even allowed to enter. But this place also is a place where residents can't leave. The literacy rate is 5%. There's no postal service, and only 1% of the individuals have electricity. The place that I'm talking about is Nepal in the 1950s. This country was going through a lot of different changes at the time. And for those of you who don't know where Nepal is, it's a country in between India and China and has the highest mountains in the world. But in the 1950s, it was going through a lot of political unrest. And actually, people were allowed to enter the country at that time. And most famously, probably most of you have heard of Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, who climbed Mount Everest in 1953. At the same time, my dad was a 17-year-old boy who was going through a very difficult decision. Even though his family was really poor, he had 3 elder sisters, his family was able to put him through schools where his 3 elder sisters didn't go past 3rd grade. And because of that, he got a really amazing opportunity to be fully sponsored by the Nepalese government to go to medical school in India. He was one of the first 4 to be able to have that opportunity. But at the same time in his life, his dad was dying. And it was because he was the eldest male in his family, it was his responsibility to take care of his mother and his 3 elder sisters. So he did decide to go to India for medical school, and his father passed away a month after he left. So my dad continued to do that throughout the 60s and ended up being sponsored again to go to England in the 1970s. So in 1974, he came back to Nepal, or 1973, he came back to Nepal and had an arranged marriage with my mother. And she had never left Nepal. And 2 weeks later, she moved to England. And later that year, I was born. And they had another opportunity he had an opportunity to come to America. So they packed up again and moved across the world with an almost 1-year in tow, and that was me. I think what's great about that story is that it's about opportunity. We all see what that opportunity is, and like that amazing thing, it's this big glowing thing about opportunity and all the potential that it may have. Next. But it's also about the pressures that we don't see right? The internal, the external, the conflict, the tensions, all the angles that you don't see, you just see about the opportunity. And then the next one, risk. There's also a lot of what ifs. What if I do? What if I don't? What if I win? What if I lose? What are the costs and benefits of doing so? So if you think about my dad, I mean, what an amazing opportunity to have that. But all the pressures and the conflict he was having with his thinking about his sisters and his mother. And then the risks of doing that. What if I go? What will happen to my family? What if I don't go? Will this opportunity ever come to me again? This is probably a once in a lifetime type of thing. And I think that with the theme of now, that's something that we all think about, that opportunity, but we don't think about sometimes on the outside about all the different things that are going on and all the pressures that someone may be facing when they need to make that decision. So, considering my dad's story, you can imagine how much pressure there was to succeed when we came to America. And I know everyone's looking at that jacket I'm wearing and wishing that they still had it, because I do too. And my dad, double plaid, all good. All good. So my parents always told me, and my sister and my brother, that we were different, but not necessarily in that special way, in a way that, especially in the 70s, that people may treat us differently because of our culture and because of the color of our skin. So to put it in perspective, in the 1970s, it's estimated that less than 100 people from Nepal were coming in every year. It was such a low number that we didn't even have our own category. We were just classified as other Asians. And it was just so low that no one even tracked that. So they always really wanted me to assimilate and make sure I had the best opportunity. So much so that they never taught me their own language, not because they were rejecting their culture, but they wanted to give me every opportunity to succeed. So that really caused me to be really painfully shy, and I didn't like to speak. And I usually had my head in books, or I was doing puzzles, because the last thing I wanted to do was kind of just go out and talk to people, because they said I needed to study and that was what's going to make me succeed. So, and I loved that polyester overall thing that I'm wearing. I wore it all the time. I remember that. I wore it all the time. Even though we were told we were different, I think when you're little, you don't really understand what that means. Like, what does it mean you're different? So one of the first stories I remember is I was 7 years old and I was riding my bike to my friend's house, Natalie. And I got there and her mother and her greeted me at the door. And my friend said, my dad came home early, so you can't come in because he doesn't like people like you. So I didn't really know what that meant. You know, as a 7-year-old, I was like, oh, like your dad doesn't like first graders. I don't know. But I saw the look on her mom's face, and even though I didn't understand, I knew something else was going on. I didn't quite get it. So these types of moments kept me really reserved and shy, not just only with my friends, but also my family. We once had relatives with us for an entire week. I didn't talk to them for the entire week. I was like maybe 12 or 13, and I didn't talk to them for the entire week. And you know, they're like, why don't you? I was like, I have nothing to say. You know, for an entire week, I had nothing to say. All right, next slide. So when you're a child, you can kind of get away with that behavior. But as an adult, that really can restrict you. And as a woman, that can really harm you. Because if you don't use your voice, you can't speak up for yourself. But you also can't speak up for others, and you also can't make impact and change. And one story I remember in particular is in my early 20s, I went with my boss. We were about to they were trying to get a new client, so I got to go. I did terribly. I talked really fast. I didn't make eye contact. I knew in the moment it did terribly, and then that makes it worse, right? When you know you're doing bad, then you keep on getting worse. And because I didn't think people, you know, I didn't want to waste their time. And then my manager, I have a very distinct memory of this, where my manager pulled me aside and said, you know that people actually want to hear what you have to say. And it seems so obvious now that people, like, you have a voice, but then I really decided that I need to make a change. And I was not going to succeed by just reading and studying. I had to find my voice. So I took a really radical approach with that. I signed up for improv classes. So for those of you who don't know what improv is, think of Second City or Whose Line Is It Anyway? So basically you're on stage, people throw out suggestions, and you're supposed to make a scene right there, right now. Pretty much my worst nightmare, if I'm going to be honest. But the amazing thing about improv is it really teaches you to go with the flow. It teaches you how to have conversations. And if everything comes together, it can be ridiculously funny, but also deep and amazing at the same time. I performed in the first all-female improv group for 4 years, once or twice a month. So that's a picture of me and them. So even as an adult, I really think of myself really quiet and shy, and I don't like to talk about myself. And some of the stories I share, like my friends haven't even heard these stories. And when I think about everything that I've mentioned, from my dad to my shyness, is a million reasons I shouldn't be here right now. But if I hadn't had all those experiences, I also still wouldn't be here right now. So it's just really interesting to think about how all of these things kind of come together. So you really have to think about our past has a purpose, and it really drives who you are today and where you are today. And I think many of those experiences led me to engineering at Ohio State. All of those times that I was reading or doing puzzles is because I realized I liked solving complex problems. And I continued to do that through my career and focus on bigger and more complex problems that affected people. So in 2019, I took the role of Chief Innovation and Technology Officer for CODA, where I can now focus on my community and the problems that we're trying to solve there. So let me tell you a little bit about CODA and Columbus, actually, and what's going on here. Columbus is the 14th largest city in the United States, which I have lived here the majority of my life, and I find that hard to believe. If you think about what's going to happen, we are essentially going to be a population of projections are 3.5 to 4 million people by 2050. So one of the great things that is happening, one of the great things about living in Columbus is it's so easy to move around. It's so easy to live here. And in COVID, it was super easy to move around. But I'm sure you remember, and you're starting to see again that congestion. That trip that took me 5 minutes is now starting to take 15 minutes. And now imagine maybe double that population being here right now, and think about all of those different streets. So it really considers and also when you think about Intel and all the other companies that are coming, these projections may actually be conservative. So just in comparison, Nashville and Austin were similar sizes to us. But they grew before us and a little bit quicker for us. And now that if you haven't been to those cities, they're very congested and it's very hard to move. And now they're in a reactive state rather than proactive state because it's a much harder problem to fix. So with CODA's vision is to move every life forward. And I think what is so important what that means to me is that means leaving no one behind. That if we as a community are going to experience all of this prosperity, then we want everyone to have that prosperity, and mobility should not be a factor to limit your prosperity. So really our opportunity right now for Columbus is to redefine what it means to be a transit agency and redefine us not just as a bus organization, but as a mobility solutions provider. And we're examining new and creative ways for transit. And you heard one of the things we did was the first bus on demand. But I'm also going to tell you about a couple other things that we're working on too that you might not be tracking. We are about to roll out the largest of its kind artificial intelligence project that takes data from other transit agencies and other organizations, other governmental organizations, to have an integrated web-based platform that integrates data so we can be more predictive about where traffic and incidents may occur. And the first phase of this is going to roll out this summer. We also just rolled out our electronic fare payment system. So oftentimes, you might need to have those exact $2, or you have to go buy a paper pass. Well, now you can pay with your mobile phone, and for those who don't have mobile phones, we have smart cards. And I think this is a creative way. It's not just about mobile payments, it's a really creative way to solve things for the community. It used to be with a paper pass, you'd have to go downtown, get a pass, but some people either don't want to do that initial financial outlay because they don't know what that's going to if they're going to use it all, or they can't afford it. What this does is that it tracks your payments, and once you hit the $62 limit, you no longer get charged. Because in the past, those who could afford it the least were paying the most because they were paying $2 at a time. Now, through the card or the app, that is going to be taken care of for them. So that's just an example of some of the things that we're doing there. And then lastly, going back to the mobility of the area, is a program called Link Us. Link Us is a multi-million-dollar initiative with the City of Columbus, with MORPC, to look at how we can look at corridors in the city and how we can move people around. And it's a really comprehensive plan that's going to reimagine our city and reimagine transportation. You can see everything from more walkable development, higher quality stations, BRT, which is bus rapid transit, sidewalks, greenways, all of these different types of things are some of the things that we're planning to be proactive for what's coming up in the future. You can just see here's an area before, and then what that will look like after. Again, all to help mobility and transportation. And if you think about it, even if you don't use transit, all of this affects how we're going to move and how we live in this community. So it's going to be a really transformational change. So when I look back at how different I felt as a child, it's really amazing that not only do I belong, but now I'm part of shaping the community that I live in today. And when I think about my father and that he decided that now is the time, I'm now able to think of bigger and better things for our community in a place that I call home. So this morning, after 2 long years and we begin to reopen, I want you to think about the opportunities that you may have for you or your family or your community, and how you decide if you take advantage of those opportunities. From the outside, we may wonder, how did someone get that great opportunity? But there's so much that we don't know that's happening outside and looking in. We don't realize all the pressures that someone may be experiencing and some of the costs they might have. Not one of the stories I've told today about my dad, myself, or my community don't have those different things that we have to balance. Of course, my dad should have been looking for a better life. Of course, I should have stepped outside of my shell and try to figure out how I find my voice. And of course, like our region, we need to think about how we move and mobility so we can all prosper from that. But behind the scenes, there's all sorts of risks and challenges and rewards with that. But I think one thing we all need to remember is that prosperity will never happen if we let risk cloud where we want to do for ourselves and our community. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak today, and it's really been an honor to be in front of you today.